Hi everybody, this is Leanna, and this week we are building a program that takes an integer input from the user that is going to be representing the number of floors in a hotel. And then we're going to loop through all of those floors and ask the user for the total number of rooms, the occupancy level, what's empty, the number of rooms that are empty, and then at the end of this program, the occupancy rate is going to be calculated for the entire hotel based on the user's inputs. And also we're skipping floor 13 because hotels notoriously do not include a floor 13. Okay, so we're including our preprocessing directives, IOStream, which helps us display output on the screen and reads input from the user. And we have IOmanip, which helps us with formatting. And then we use our using statement here to reference the namespace for IOStream objects, and that helps us reduce redundant code later because we don't have to do std:" coot or whatever. And then we have the start of our function, and we declare our numFloors variable as an integer. And then I've created some counters for the total rooms, total occupied, total empty, and I've initialized them all to 0. And these are going to be our main counters. So in our for loop, we'll have other counters for each floor, but this will help us calculate the occupancy rate at the end. And then let's also declare the occupancy rate variable that'll hold the actual calculated rate as a double. And then we ask the user for the number of floors. And we want to use an input validation loop because the user might enter a negative number or it might enter 0. So if they do that, we're using this while loop, and you said, you entered a negative number 0, please enter a positive number. So as long as the user is entering bad numbers, they're going to be directed to this error message, and then they'll be asked, then the numFloors variable is going to be tested again through this condition. So once it is positive, then we continue to this for loop. And so we're iterating through each floor. We are declaring, initializing floor equals 1, so we're going to start with the first floor. And then I've also declared these local variables, rooms, occupied, empty, and these are going to be our counters for each floor. And so this is our for loop condition. So floor, which is equal to 1 on the first loop, has to be less than or equal to the numFloors, which is the user input variable, whatever the user entered in the beginning, which would be the number of floors in the hotel. And then as each loop completes, we're going to increment the floor counter by 1 because we just want to go increase each floor by 1 and then ask the user how many rooms are occupied, how many are empty, etc. So because we want to ignore floor 13, we need an if statement that'll basically, if this floor counter meets 13, then we just want to go to the next floor. So we'll just write continue, which basically makes the loop go to the next loop. So as long as it's not floor 13, let's do all of this stuff. So we're going to ask the user for how many rooms. We're going to put the user input into this rooms variable. And then we also want to do some input validation again with the while loop. So we don't want to let the user enter rooms that are anywhere from 1 to 9, or 0 to 9 or whatever. So we want to make sure they enter at least 10. So as long as they're entering 10 or more, then we can ask them how many rooms are occupied. And whatever they input, we are going to tie that to the occupied variable. Then again, I wanted to make sure that, for example, if the user said there are 10 rooms on floor 1, and then they were asked how many rooms are occupied, what if they said 12 are occupied? But how could 12 be occupied if there are only 10 floors on floor 1? So I have another input validation loop that makes sure that whatever the user inputs for occupancy level is not greater than the actual number of rooms on the floor, and it's also not negative. So if it's negative or greater than number of rooms, they're going to get this error message. They're going to have to enter a new occupancy number between 0 and whatever the number of rooms that they entered is. And then we're going to calculate the number of empty rooms for that floor. And then this is where our main counters that exist outside of the for loop come in. So these were initialized to 0 initially, and then we're basically we're basically just adding the local counts for each floor to this main counter. So as we go through each floor, floor 1, floor 2, floor 3, the rooms variable is going to change, the occupied variable is going to change, empty is going to change based on each floor's counts and the user's inputs. But these total occupied, total empty, total rooms, they're going to keep accumulating. So finally, we display the totals. There are these many rooms, these many occupied, these many empty, and we'll calculate the occupancy rate. And then finally, we format, so we have 1 decimal, and then we return 0 to indicate that our program is complete. So let's actually see this, how it looks like in action. So okay. All right. Please enter the number of floors. Let's just do a negative number. Oh no. Okay, fine. There's going to be 14 floors for floor 1. How many rooms are there? Just for time's sake, I'm just going to enter 10 rooms for every floor. But here, let's do the input validation loop again. So let me enter 0. Yes, okay. So we need 10. And let's just say 1. 10, 1, 10, 1, 10, 1, 10, 1. Oh, and let me show you the occupied validation loop as well. 10, and let's say there's 13 rooms occupied. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll do 1, and then keep going. So we're gonna get to floor 13 soon. Or not. See, it skipped floor 13, so that's good. Okay. So the main counter counted the total number of rooms based on the user input. 13 are occupied. That makes sense because we had 13 floors and I was entering 1 for every single floor. And 117 are empty. Cool, cool. occupancy rate is 10%. That makes sense. Alrighty, well, as far as any program or challenges that I encountered while writing this, I don't remember having a lot of trouble with this one. I guess just being able to differentiate between these local counter variables and then the main counter variables was a little tricky. And again, I keep having trouble with defining the user input variables because if I initially had an unsigned integer, which basically means you can only have a positive user input, but in order for our while loop input validation to work, we need the user to be able to enter a negative number or 0. So instead of unsigned, I'm just using basic integer. Alrighty, well, thanks for watching.